Well, we're back in the faith chapter again today. Just a little bit out of into chapter 12 of Hebrews, and those first couple of verses are a continuation of the faith chapter. You know, I was thinking today, or not today, but earlier this week, about how rapidly it is that we can move from place to place in this day and age. You know, supersonic jets, while they move our bodies from one place to another faster than the speed of sound, they won't help us be better people once we get there. I don't care whether you drive an old jalopy or a high-end Mercedes. When you leave this point A, you get to point B just because of the mode of transportation. There's no guarantee that you're going to be a better person when you get to where it is you're going. You see, there's a difference between transportation and transformation. And there's a difference between commuting and character. The writer of Hebrews reminds us that real human change isn't fast, nor does it happen in a straight line from point A to point B. It just doesn't happen. You see, there's no supersonic transport to holiness. It's hard work. It's hard work. We were talking about it a little bit in confirmation class today. We use a different word, perfect. Be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. And Tanya is saying, well, no one can be perfect. No, we can't, but that's not an excuse not to be more perfect today than you were yesterday. Or, put it in other words, be more holy today than you were yesterday. You see, real transformation, real human transformation, usually requires a slower, meandering path that's more rocky and difficult than just strapping yourself into the seat of a jet liner. The path of faith, says the writer, requires more patience and perseverance than it does power and propulsion. Hebrews 11 is called the faith chapter because the writer uses the history of Israel as an example of a slow-moving progress that many followers of Jesus make toward the destination of Christ-like holiness. These heroes of faith have their flaws, and the mistakes and the missteps are familiar to us as their triumphs. And all of them are on their way somewhere, but never fully reached that destination that they were traveling toward. As the writer puts it, he says, all these died in faith without having received the promise. But from a distance they saw and greeted them, and they confessed that they were strangers and foreigners on the earth. Take the people of Israel, for instance, and their journey from Egypt, for example. After the miracle of the Red Sea, it took 40 years of wandering in the desert before they finally reached the Promised Land. And it was only by faith that they kept following God and God's agent, Moses. And that faith wasn't immune to weather either. That is, the journey came with storms of hardship and deprivation. And when they finally reached, if you remember the story, when they finally reached that promised land, that land promised by God, they had to practice more patience. They had to march around Jericho for how many days? How many? 7 days. They had to march around Jericho waiting for God to act on their behalf. And even then, their intel came from a prostitute named Rahab, who had enough faith to trust a God that she'd never known. despite the risk to their own life. And the list of those who took this long journey of faith reveals that the ride is never smooth. Take old Gideon, for example. He had to trust God that God wasn't setting him up. When God told him to send home an army and instead defeat the enemy with 300 guys carrying clay pots and torches. Or Barak, who didn't move on a similar enemy without partnering with Deborah, a woman called by God. Or Samson, who was a long-headed playboy. He was, who got in trouble over a haircut. And yet trusted God to do the right thing through him in the end. David defeated Goliath with a sling and a stone, but blew it with Bathsheba. Samuel was a good leader, except in his own household. Despite all their dysfunctions, fear, and bad decision-making, God was able to use each of these flawed heroes to preserve his people. It was their faith and perseverance, not their innate ability, that enabled them to be used by God. It was through faith that they conquered kingdoms, administered justice, obtained promises, shut the mouths of lions, quenched raging fires, escaped the edge of the sword, and won strength out of weakness, became mighty in war, and put foreign armies to flight. And the writer is on the list of hardships endured by people who took the journey of faith. He says they died in horrible ways in order to obtain a better resurrection. They suffered torture and imprisonment. They suffered death by stoning, by being sawn in two, by the sword. They suffered extreme poverty and deprivation. They wandered through the deserts and the mountains, sleeping in caves and holes in the ground. And their character and faith development was neither fast nor easy. The end of the journey wasn't completely clear, and yet God was setting them up for a destination better than they could even imagine. Given the faithful example of this great cloud of witnesses, the writer of Hebrews urges us to check our desire for a quick fix, the weight of sin that tends to slow us down, and instead run with perseverance, he says, the race that is set before us. Most of us know that this race of life isn't easy. There are bumps and there are bumps and there are places, Paul, where you want to pull your hair out. And sometimes we come near or close to losing our faith. Sometimes we lose it and recover it. To get from point A to point B is never a straight line for us as people of faith. There's bumps and there's twists and there's turns and there's holes and there's rocks in the road. You know, life isn't so much like being fired to a rifle barrel on a high rate of speed as it is being nudged along by God, who walks with us every step of the way. The only example of this kind of traveler, says the writer, is Jesus. He's the spiritual entrepreneur who pioneers and perfects the way of faith, having been tested in his own life as the fully human incarnation of a fully divine God. That's hard to get hold of sometimes. That's really hard. hard to grab a hold. Fully human and yet fully divine. That's hard to get your hands on. But by faith, we believe that Jesus was fully human. Jesus understood the destination of life to be a place of joy. The joy of bringing two disparate destinations closer together. In Jesus, heaven and earth came closer to each other. And to bring that about, he had to endure the cross and its accompanying stigma, shame, and failure. But while we know that Jesus' journey toward Calvary was about as slow and painful as a journey gets, it actually led to our redemption. His enthronement at the right hand of God, in which he shall come to unite heaven and earth once and for all. So the writer says, consider the difficulty of Jesus' journey of faith on our own behalf, so that you may not grow weary or lose heart. You see, folks, Jesus endured the hostility of sinners, the pain of crucifixion, the hurt of betrayal, and the weight of the world's sin, all the way to the cross. And he can do that, suggests the writer. And we too can endure faithful suffering on his behalf. In a world that looks for the path of least resistance, the easiest way through. The path of faith quite often looks dangerous and difficult. G.K. Chesterton once put it this way: Christianity has not been tried and found wanting. It's been found difficult and not tried. People who complain about a little traffic or a delay at the airport will have a hard time enduring real suffering and persecution when it comes. In our impatience, we look for shortcuts to faith, believing that it should be easy. But I'll tell you right up front, folks, there are no shortcuts to faith. No easy words that you can find here in the Bible to read and mumble and invoke some incantation, and suddenly faith lives in you full bloom and mature. It does not happen that way. It doesn't happen quickly. And Jesus reminds us of that notion, or Jesus rids us of that notion, reminding us that following him requires a mindset of a marathon runner rather than a sprinter. As Paul puts it in Romans 5:4-5, he says we must boast in our suffering, knowing that suffering produces endurance, endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not disappoint us because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit that's been given to us, you and I. The Christian life, on the other hand, is best sustained slowly and steadily through faith in the midst of suffering. It's about patience rather than repulsion, and the winding way of the cross rather than the straight line of desire for human progress. Whatever you're going through today, whatever it may be, whatever you're going through, know that you can endure it in faith because Jesus walks through it with you. I'll preach that to these things. Please stand up there and say. My way hasn't always been easy either. Sometimes the road looks pretty dark. Things look hopeless. And yet somehow in the midst of that deep, immense darkness, somehow, I would always find a glimmer of light, a ray of hope. I hope in Christ. Jesus walks through the truth. He's able to sympathize with our weakness. So let's approach the throne of grace with boldness, so that we may receive mercy and grace to help us in our time of need. It's really, folks, the only way to change our humanity. So I don't care how good you try to be.